The first sound was the ticking of a clock. Slow, deliberate, each click echoing through the 60-story silence of Vale Dominion's executive floor. Outside the glass walls, rain tapped against the windows in a soft, uneven rhythm, like a hesitant knock on a door no one planned to open. The air conditioning hummed with a low, steady sigh, the kind a tired building makes long after most people have gone home. Evan Cole sat alone in the waiting room outside the CEO's office, hands wrapped tightly around a worn folder. Inside were the pieces of a life stretched too thin overdue rent notices, medical bills, referral letters for his daughter's therapy sessions. Every shift he'd picked up, every hour he'd traded for a few dollars more, they all lived inside that folder. He squeezed it until the edges bent under his fingers. He inhaled slow and deep, letting the air steady him. Just let me keep this job. That's all I need tonight. Somewhere in the distance, a dull thunder rolled across the city. Meanwhile, in the library of a small public school on the south side, 7-year-old Lily Cole sat at a wooden table with her backpack tucked under her feet. She hummed under her breath, tracing soft strokes of crayon on paper. In her drawing, a small house glowed with a warm, yellow light, and beside it stood the shape of a man. Broad shoulders, gentle posture, head slightly bowed as though listening. "Daddy always comes back when the light is on," she whispered to herself. Back on the 60th floor behind a door thick enough to muffle everything except regret, Aurora Vale stood in front of her conference table, arms crossed. Her CFO, Gerald Kane, clicked through a digital report like he was flipping cards in a rigged deck. "Your father's rule worked for decades," he reminded her. His voice carried that smooth, polished confidence of a man who'd never once feared losing a paycheck. "Test the bottom ranks. Push them. Apply pressure and watch who cracks. It reveals character." Aurora didn't answer. She watched the rain streak down the glass, the world outside blurred into silver lines. Strength is measured by resilience, her father always said. People who can't withstand pressure don't belong in this company. She hated how deeply his voice lived inside her. Gerald tapped the corner of a tablet. "One more test won't kill anyone. And frankly, it'll show the board you're strong enough to lead." Strong. The word felt heavier than it should. After a few seconds, Aurora exhaled, barely audible, a thin thread of breath. "Send him in." The assistant opened the door to the waiting room. Evan rose, smoothing the front of his uniform despite knowing it made no difference. He stepped into a room lit only by the soft buzz of recessed lights and the drumming of rain against the glass. Aurora didn't smile. She didn't offer a seat, didn't introduce herself. She simply met his eyes with a kind of cold, testing stillness. "Mr. Cole," she said, "you're fired." The words didn't fall like a blow, they froze, suspended in the air, then pierced straight through him. Evan felt his heartbeat slow, like someone held a hand over his chest and pressed. He saw Lily's drawing in his mind, the yellow lamp she always kept lit until he came home. He saw the stack of medical forms he still hadn't paid off. He remembered holding her through those nights she woke screaming for a mother who would never return. He swallowed. Hard. Aurora waited for a reaction, begging anger excuses. She'd seen it all. She braced for it. But Evan didn't raise his voice, didn't plead. He breathed in through his nose, steadier than he felt, and finally whispered, "Please, don't tell my daughter yet." Aurora blinked. That wasn't the script. Evan continued, voice low tight. "She's finally sleeping through the night. I don't want her waking up wondering why I stopped trying." The hum of the air conditioning filled the pause, soft, constant, almost compassionate in its steadiness. Aurora's fingers twitched at her side as though his words had brushed something she didn't realize was exposed. For a moment, she wasn't a CEO. She was 8 years old again, standing in a long, shadowed hallway while her father's voice cut through the dark. "If you can't get up on your own, you don't deserve my support." That night, no one turned on a light for her. She cleared her throat. "Mr. Cole, this wasn't real. It was a test." Evan stared at her, not angry, just exhausted in a way she had never seen up close. A test, he repeated softly as though tasting the word for the first time. Some people can't afford to be tested, ma'am. The sentence settled over the room, heavy as wet concrete. Aurora's breath caught not visibly, not dramatically, but enough that she felt something small and sharp shift inside her chest. Evan gave a respectful nod, turned and walked toward the door. His footsteps were slow but steady, the sound of a man determined not to fall apart where anyone could see him. When the door clicked shut behind him, the room felt unnaturally still. Gerald began to speak, but Aurora raised a hand, silencing him. She stepped toward the window, the rain louder now, tapping harder against the glass like the world was urging her to listen. She replayed Evan's words again and again, each repetition carving deeper. Some people can't afford to be tested. She rested her palm against the cold window, her reflection faint and blurred. For the first time since taking her father's place, Aurora Vale wondered if strength wasn't what she'd been taught. But the courage to admit you might be wrong. As the storm raged outside, Aurora stood frozen before the glass wall, unable to shake the echo of Evan's voice in her mind. Something fundamental inside her had cracked, and she wasn't sure yet whether it was breaking or finally beginning to open. The rain eased into a soft drizzle by the time Evan stepped off the company shuttle and made his way toward the school. The pavement still glistened under the streetlights, each footstep sending up the faintest splash. He felt the weight of the day dragging behind him, Aurora's icy words, his own steady tone masking the panic underneath, and that folder of unpaid bills tucked beneath his arm. But the moment he reached the school gate, something in him softened. He heard children laughing through the hallway windows, their voices echoing against lockers and cracked tiles. That familiar sound steadied him more than he liked to admit. Inside the library, Lily looked up from her coloring as soon as she spotted him. Her face lit with that pure, uncomplicated joy kids give only to the person they trust most. "Daddy," she called out, waving the drawing above her head. I added more yellow. He crouched beside her, gently taking the page. The house she'd drawn glowed with a warm, bright light, bright enough to chase away shadows she never spoke about directly. Beside the house was a small girl with a backpack and a man with tired shoulders but a lifted chin. "It looks beautiful," he murmured. His voice cracked just barely, but Lily didn't notice. She leaned into him, smelling faintly of crayons and library dust. For a brief moment, Evan allowed himself to breathe again. But as he walked her home, the edges of reality pressed in the overdue notice tucked under the door, the blinking light on the answering machine, the hum of the old refrigerator that might give out any day. Lily didn't need to see any of that tonight. "Daddy, can we turn on the lamp?" she asked softly. He nodded. Inside their small apartment, he crossed to the corner table and flipped the old brass switch. The lamp flickered once, then glowed a comforting golden hue, her signal that the world was safe for now. "As long as this light is on," he told her, "I'm here." She nodded, like it was a promise carved into stone. When Lily settled at the table with her crayons again, Evan went to the bathroom to repair the leaking pipe that had been hissing since morning. The sound echoed like a slow, persistent drip of time slipping away. After that, he tightened loose screws on an outlet, then stepped onto the balcony to hand off a small repaired space heater to their elderly neighbor downstairs, another odd job he'd taken just to cover part of Lily's therapy bill. He moved through these tasks quietly, mechanically, because if he stopped even for a moment, the weight of Aurora's test might crush him. Some people can't afford to be tested. He knew the truth of that sentence better than anyone. On the other side of the city, Aurora Vale unlocked the door of her penthouse. The click echoed through the vast, immaculate space. No humming refrigerator, no crayons scattered on a wooden table, just silence. Perfect, controlled silence. Her heels clicked across marble floors as she made her way to the living room. She sat down on a velvet sofa that had never once held a memory. The air held the faint scent of expensive candles, lavender, eucalyptus, serenity wrapped in luxury. But none of it made her feel anything. She reached for a glass of water, then froze as a memory surfaced. 16 years old, standing in front of her father at a dinner table, exhausted, hungry, trembling. He slid a plate toward her, congratulating her for surviving his Independence Month. No hug, no warmth, just a nod of approval that felt more like a stamp of ownership. Weak people complain. Strong people endure. She had learned to swallow feelings whole like stones. Her phone vibrated on the table. "Father," she answered, pressing the phone to her ear. "Aurora," he said, voice clipped. "Gerald tells me you've been softening. Remember your training. Weakness spreads like rot. Don't let these employees pull you down. You test people to reveal their worth. That's how this company survives." Aurora remained silent, staring at the skyline blurred by the rain. "Do you hear me?" he asked again. "Yes," she whispered. "I hear you." But the truth echoed louder inside her. "I hear Evan, too." When the call ended, she sank back into the sofa. Something inside her unsettled something she didn't have a name for yet. A notification pinged. "Gerald. Performance summaries from the last employee tests. Nicely handled, especially with the janitor. The board will be pleased." Aurora's jaw tightened. Her reflection in the darkened window looked back at her. A woman her father built, not a woman she chose to be. She stood abruptly and walked to her home office. "Send me the last 3 months of Cole's camera footage and HR reports," she instructed her assistant through the intercom. There was a brief pause. "All of them, Ms. Vale. All of them." Her voice was cool, but the flicker behind her eyes had changed. She didn't know yet what she was searching for, but she knew it had started with a single sentence spoken by a man who should have broken, but didn't. Back at the apartment, the night settled into a soft hush. The ticking lamp gave off its warm glow as Lily drifted to sleep, her breathing slow and even. Evan sat beside her bed, running a hand through her hair, listening to the small sounds of nighttime, the creak of the walls, the distant sirens, the faint hum of the street. He wasn't fired, not exactly, but he wasn't safe either. He whispered to himself, "One more shift. I just need one more shift." But deep down, a thought gnawed. How do I tell her if I can't protect our life anymore? He pressed a hand against his forehead, letting the weight settle there. Up on the 60th floor, Aurora stood alone in her office, staring at the rain. She replayed Evan's voice in her mind. Some people can't afford to be tested. For the first time, the words made her question not the strength of others, but her own. As the city dimmed under the last drizzle of rain, Aurora leaned closer to the screen displaying Evan's file. Her voice was steady, almost cold, but her heart was not. Pull every record she instructed, every shift, every camera. I want to know who this man really is. Something had begun inside her, and she wasn't sure if she could stop it now. The office was silent except for the low hum of the servers warming the air. The rest of Vale Dominion had long gone home, leaving only the faint whisper of the ventilation system and the occasional groan of metal shifting as the building cooled for the night. Aurora Vale sat alone at her desk, a steaming cup of untouched herbal tea beside her. The soft scent drifted upward, chamomile honey, a hint of lemon, but none of it settled her. Her eyes stayed fixed on the collection of security footage tiles open across her monitor. She clicked on the first clip. A quiet hallway appeared, fluorescent lights buzzing faintly. Evan Cole stepped into frame with a replacement bulb tucked under one arm. He moved without rush, without complaint, even when the ladder wobbled slightly beneath him. He steadied it with one hand, climbed, and replaced the bulb in a clean, practiced motion. No one else was there. He didn't look around for approval or witnesses. He simply fixed the light, climbed down, and gathered his tools. Aurora leaned back slightly. He didn't cut corners. He didn't act like someone who felt invisible. She opened another clip. In this one, Evan helped Mrs. Davenport, the oldest custodian on staff, maneuver a heavy trash bin. She apologized again and again, embarrassed, but Evan only laughed softly and said, "Don't worry. We all carry something heavy." His voice was warm, steady, a voice that made people feel safe. Aurora watched his posture, the way his shoulders tilted toward the person speaking, how he nodded thoughtfully. Who listens like that, she wondered. Most people on her executive floor spoke to win. Evan seemed to speak to understand. She exhaled slowly. The sound barely rose above the soft clicking of keys as she moved to the next clip. This time, the video came from the small cafe in the lobby. The espresso machine sputtered loud, uneven. The barista frowned, flustered by a long line of customers waiting. Evan stepped forward, rolling up his sleeves. He unplugged the machine, inspected the wiring, tightened a loose component, then plugged it back in. The machine purred to life. The customers clapped lightly. The barista sighed with relief. Evan only smiled and stepped away as though helping was simply the most natural part of breathing. Aurora swallowed. How many people did he help in a single night without anyone noticing? She clicked again. This clip hit harder. It showed Evan leaning against a locker in the staff hallway, phone pressed to his ear. The background was quiet except for the gentle whir of a floor buffer turning off nearby. "Look at the little lamp, baby," he whispered. His tone softened in a way Aurora had never heard from anyone in a corporate building. "As long as it's on, Daddy, we'll always come back." Aurora's breath caught. There was something in his voice, something that wrapped itself around the empty corners inside her chest, a promise she had never been given, a kind of love she had never seen firsthand. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the sound linger. This man is holding his world together with nothing but his own hands, she thought. And I tested him like he was disposable. Her father's words slipped into her mind like a shadow she couldn't escape. Weakness will destroy you faster than any enemy. But what if she had misunderstood strength all along? Aurora clicked into the final set of files, the HR records. Accident at a construction site. Changed careers to night maintenance work. Wife lost in a hit and run. Medical debt. Warnings from landlords. Notes from supervisors praising him for never complaining for taking the shifts no one wanted. There was a short file labeled simply Preferred Hours, flexible to accommodate daughter's therapy. She read that line twice. A father rearranging his entire life around a child who'd already endured more than she should. Aurora felt something inside her twist, not guilt exactly. Something older, deeper. A longing to understand how someone with so little could hold so fiercely to hope. She replayed the recording of Lily's voice from the hallway clip. Soft, tiny, trusting. "Daddy, come home soon." Then Evan, again gentle. "The lamp is on, sweetheart. I'm coming back." Aurora pressed her fingers to her temple. The faint tapping of the rain against the glass behind her felt suddenly louder, sharper, like the world insisting she pay attention. She thought of her own childhood home, dark, cold, not because they lacked electricity, but because affection had never been permitted to warm the air. Her father didn't believe in lamps left on for comfort. Lights were tools, not symbols. Did anyone ever come back for me? She wondered. The thought landed heavy. She turned back to the footage. On the screen, Evan picked up his toolbox, wiped sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, and headed toward the basement-level controls. And then, abruptly, the weather alert flashed in the corner of her screen. Severe storm warning. High winds expected. Possible power outages citywide. Aurora leaned closer. The timestamp matched the upcoming night shift. Her gaze dropped to the tiny camera feed showing the facility control room, Evan's scheduled station. Dim lighting. Rows of electrical panels. A room that depended on a single person keeping things stable. A storm strong enough to knock out power across the city. A man whose daughter was terrified of the dark. A fragile routine built around a single lamp left glowing in a worn apartment. The emotional threads tied themselves together too quickly for her to dismiss. "God," she murmured, "what have I done?" Her heart thudded, an unfamiliar weight pulling harder with each beat. She wasn't sure yet what she would do, but the decision had already begun forming in her chest. It pulsed there, urgent and warm. One thing was clear: Evan Cole was not someone she could simply test and forget. As the storm alert intensified, Aurora's eyes fixed on the flickering feed from the basement control room. The warning tone echoed through her office, low and steady, like the beginning of something she couldn't yet name. And somewhere in the city's widening darkness, a little girl slept with a golden lamp glowing beside her bed. The storm arrived without mercy. Winds howled along the high-rise corridors of downtown like a chorus of restless spirits rattling windows and shaking awnings. Far below, car alarms chirped under the assault of rain that hammered the asphalt in sharp, punishing bursts. Lightning flashed somewhere behind a bank of clouds, but its glow barely penetrated the thick, rolling darkness swallowing the city. Inside Vale Dominion's sprawling basement control room, Evan Cole wiped sweat from his brow. The air was warm, too warm, as circuits strained under the weight of the storm's energy. The faint buzz of overworked transformers pulsed through the floor. He knew the signs the grid was pushing toward a dangerous threshold. He tightened a valve, checked another meter, listened to the hum shift between pitches. He'd learned to read machines the way some men read weather. And tonight everything sounded like a warning. His phone vibrated. He didn't have to see the screen to know who it was. He stepped into the quieter alcove by the breaker box and answered. "Hey, Lily." What he heard next hollowed him out. "Daddy." The light went out. Her voice trembled like it did during the worst nights. "Is this like the night Mommy didn't come back?" His heart clenched. The storm had knocked out power in their neighborhood, of course it had. Their building never held up during weather like this. No, sweetheart. No. It's not like that at all. He kept his voice soft, steady, like he could rebuild her safety with nothing but tone. "I'm right here. I'm still working. I'm coming home as soon as I can." Behind her voice he heard their neighbor fumbling with candles, cupboards slamming a pot clattering onto the stove. Familiar chaos swallowed by fear. Lily whimpered. "It's too dark, Daddy. I can't see the lamp." He closed his eyes. He could almost feel her small hands gripping her blankets, her shoulders curling in. "I know, baby," he whispered. "Just breathe for me, okay? Listen to my voice." But she cried harder, a sound that cracked him open. He checked the system monitors. Circuits were spiking. The storm's pressure meant the entire hotel tower was minutes from losing partial power. If he abandoned his station even briefly, systems could fail: elevators, emergency lights, heating units. People relied on stability he was responsible for. His supervisor's voice echoed from earlier warnings. "This storm is going to strain the building. No one leaves their post." He swallowed hard. "I'll call you right back, sweetheart," he whispered. "You're not alone. I promise." When he ended the call, the silence felt like betrayal. He moved quickly down the hallway, phone still in his hand, rain roaring through the vents like distant waves. He dialed his supervisor. The man answered sharply. "Cole, what I'm in the middle of, I need to leave for 1 hour. My daughter, her neighborhood is out. She's terrified." His voice threatened to break. He forced it steady. "I just need time to get her somewhere safe." "No." The response landed instantly, blunt as a closed fist. "You leave now. Don't bother coming back tomorrow." Evan stiffened. "Sir, I don't make me repeat myself." The call ended with a harsh beep. He stared at the phone screen, disbelief and anger twisting into a single knot. The machines hummed louder, growing more unstable by the second. His hands trembled. "If I stay, she suffers. If I go, I lose the job that keeps her alive." A choice he never should have had to make. Up on the 60th floor, Aurora Vale stood in her darkened office, eyes on the storm pounding against the window. She had planned to go home hours ago, but something in her kept pacing the length of the room, unable to leave. Then she heard it. A thin crackle through the speaker of her office intercom, an open line from the basement feed she had forgotten to close. She walked toward the control console, frowning just as Evan's voice came through. "Please. She's only 7. She's scared. I just need 1 hour." Aurora froze. Lily. Her hand hovered over the console heart, thudding in a way she didn't fully understand. She listened. "You leave now. Don't bother coming back tomorrow." The supervisor's voice stabbed through the speaker sharp with indifference. Aurora's breath hitched. Something primal protective surged up her spine. The storm raged outside, wind beating against the glass like a warning. She thought of the footage she'd watched of Evan whispering comfort through the phone, of that tiny voice grounded by one golden lamp. Her father's lessons swarmed her mind. Never bend. Never give in. Feelings are liabilities. But another voice, a smaller one, younger, rose from the memories she spent decades burying. "Aurora, please don't leave me in the dark." The words weren't real. They were echoes of the child she had been. A child who once begged for a light that never came. And suddenly, she was moving fast. Her heels struck the tile with sharp, decisive taps as she marched toward the elevator. Rain pounded the building thunder, shaking the frame, but she didn't stop. Not until the elevator doors opened onto the basement level, the fluorescent lights flickering uncertainly. Evan stood in the control room doorway, phone still in his hand, face tight with panic he worked hard to hide. Aurora stepped forward, her voice carrying over the buzzing panels. "Mr. Cole." He turned, surprised, breathless, exhausted. She looked to his supervisor, who had followed him down the hall, arms crossed smugly. Aurora's voice sharpened. "I'll sign off every liability, every risk. If anything goes wrong, it's on me." The supervisor blinked. "Ma'am, you can't just—" "Yes, I can." She turned to Evan. Her voice softened only for him. "Go to your daughter. That's an order." For a second he just stared, stunned. His throat worked. His eyes glistened. "Thank you." "Ma'am." His voice cracked on the last word. Aurora stepped aside as he rushed toward the exit. When he reached the loading bay doors, she jogged after him and held out her car keys. "Take mine. It'll get you there faster." The keys jingled softly between them, small but heavy with meaning. Somewhere down the hallway behind a column, a faint click broke through the storm's roar. A phone camera capturing a moment out of context. A moment ready to be twisted. As Evan disappeared into the storm with her keys in hand, Aurora stood alone in the dim basement, the machines humming around her. She didn't know yet that someone had taken her act of compassion and turned it into the spark that would soon ignite a scandal. By dawn, the storm had finally broken. The city lay drenched and groggy like a boxer rising after too many rounds. Street gutters overflowed with rainwater, neon signs flickered back to life, and the hum of commuter traffic slowly rebuilt itself in the gray morning haze. But in the penthouse office of Vale Dominion, the real storm was just beginning. Aurora Vale stepped out of the elevator, her hair still slightly damp from the night before, her steps measured but unsteady. The building felt different this morning, charged, whispering, watching. She didn't know why yet. Only that the air seemed thick with something she couldn't name. She barely had time to set her coffee down before her assistant rushed in, breathless. "Miss Vale, I think you should see this." The tablet was trembling slightly in the assistant's hands. Aurora took it already, feeling her pulse begin to climb. A news site, a glaring headline. "Billionaire Aurora Vale's midnight rendezvous with mystery janitor dad." A blurred photo beneath it, grainy tilted, captured from a corner of the basement hallway. It showed Aurora, arm extended, handing her car keys to Evan Cole. The article framed it like a secret meeting, like scandal, like impropriety, like she'd been caught doing something shameful. Aurora felt the air leave her lungs in a slow, stunned exhale. "What is this?" The assistant swallowed. "It's spreading everywhere." Someone leaked the image at sunrise. Everywhere was no exaggeration. Within minutes, her phone buzzed relentlessly, notifications erupting from every direction. Threads on social media dissected the angle of the photograph, the expressions on both faces, the romantic tension, the power dynamics. Comment sections filled with gleeful speculation, half-truths, and flat-out fabrications. One post had already gone viral. CEO caught sneaking janitor lover out the back door. Billionaire romance or corporate disgrace Aurora set the tablet down slowly. Her hands were steady only because she willed them to be. Not love, not scandal, not whatever story strangers were inventing. She'd helped a father reach his terrified child. That was all. But the world didn't care about truth, it cared about narrative. And someone had handed them a ready-made one. Her office door swung open. Gerald Kane strode in without waiting to be invited, jaw-tight hair perfectly in place despite the early hour. "Aurora," he said, voice clipped, "we have a situation." She didn't look up. "I'm aware. We need to get ahead of this." He tapped a folder on her desk. The shareholders woke up to a PR nightmare. They think you exercised reckless judgment. They want a clear response by noon. Aurora finally met his eyes. "A father's child was terrified during a blackout, Gerald. I helped him. If that's reckless, this isn't about morals," he snapped. "It's about perception." His tone softened only slightly, but it was the softness of someone coaxing a cornered animal toward a trap. Right now, the board sees impropriety, fraternization, liability. The only way to clean this up is to distance the company from Mr. Cole. Aurora stiffened. Distance. He placed a document in front of her formal cold sterile. A disciplinary suspension. Recommendation for termination pending investigation. Aurora stared at the papers. For a long moment, she said nothing. Gerald filled the silence with calculated words. "We need to show the board that you're capable of prioritizing the company's reputation. If you fail to act, they'll interpret your loyalty to this man as problematic." She bristled. "My loyalty, I barely know him. But the world doesn't know that he countered, leaning close enough she could smell the faint cologne he wore, sharp metallic like polished steel. They see something else entirely." Aurora felt her jaw clench. Her throat tightened. Not because she doubted her actions last night, she knew she'd done the right thing. But systems didn't reward compassion. They punished it. Gerald stepped back, satisfied he'd planted the seed. "Do the sensible thing. Suspend him. Then issue a statement. Once the noise dies down, we move forward." He turned to leave, but paused at the door. "The board expects your decision within hours. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." When he was gone, Aurora slumped into her chair. She rubbed her temples as if she could massage clarity into her skull. But her mind kept circling the same memory, Evan in the basement, soaked in fear and determination. Lily's trembling voice through the phone. The keys in her hand. She'd acted because a little girl needed her father, and now she was being told to punish him for it. Across the city, Evan Cole didn't yet know his entire world was turning under him. He sat at the small kitchen table in his apartment, Lily curled against his side, her breathing soft and steady after the long, frightening night. He watched her sketch another version of her light-on house, adding gentle strokes of yellow crayon. The lamp hummed quietly beside them, finally restored after the blackout. "You're home early," Lily murmured drowsily. He brushed his hand through her hair. "Yeah, baby. Just wanted to make sure you were okay." She hugged his arm. "You came back, like the lamp." Her words made him swallow hard. Hope was so simple for her, so fragile. Back in the penthouse, Aurora refreshed her inbox. A new message rose to the top. From Board of Directors, subject: Immediate action. Required Aurora, handle this, or we will. No warmth, no trust, just pressure tightening like a vice. Aurora sat motionless, her heartbeat slow but heavy like footsteps echoing down a long hallway she could not yet see the end of. She opened her internal contact list. Her eyes drifted to the name she had never before noticed until last night: Evan Cole. Her finger hovered over the call button. The screen dimmed slightly, casting a soft glow across her face. She didn't know what she would say, only that the decision she made next would define everything. As the phone began to ring, its soft, persistent tone cutting through her office, Aurora drew in a breath she wasn't sure she could release. In another part of the city, Evan looked at his buzzing screen, unaware the world had already changed around him, and that the call he was about to answer might cost him everything. The phone vibrated twice before Evan finally answered, careful not to wake Lily, who had fallen asleep curled against his arm. The storm had exhausted her. The night had aged him. "Mr. Cole, Aurora," said her voice low, too controlled. "I need you to come in this morning." Evan felt his stomach drop. "Is this about last night?" A pause. "Yes." He closed his eyes. He didn't want to wake Lily with the quiet dread tightening his chest. "I'll be there soon." When the call ended, the apartment felt unbearably still. The lamp glowed faintly on the nightstand, casting a soft amber circle that made Lily look even smaller than she was. He brushed her hair back gently. She didn't stir. How many nights have I promised her we'd be okay? He wasn't sure he could keep that promise anymore. By the time he reached Vale Dominion, the storm had passed, but the air inside the building felt heavier than the clouds outside ever did. Whispers carried through the lobby like quiet winds, speculation, curiosity, suspicion. He ignored them all. When he stepped into Aurora's office, she stood behind her desk posture, taut eyes shadowed with something complicated she didn't let show often. She gestured to the chair across from her. "Evan." "Sit, please." He lowered himself slowly, bracing for impact. Aurora inhaled sharply, folding her hands in front of her. "There's been fallout from the photo. More than I anticipated." Her voice faltered a rare crack in her polished exterior before she steadied it again. "The board believes your presence in the building right now could worsen the situation." Evan blinked, the words sinking in like cold water. "My presence?" "Yes." She didn't look away, though he could tell she wanted to. "They want you to take a leave of absence. Effective today." Silence dropped between them, not soft, but harsh and metallic like a steel bar hitting concrete. Evan leaned back slowly, breath thinning. "So they win." His voice was level, but underneath it a quiet hurt trembled. Aurora opened her mouth, but he pushed forward. "They twist a moment where I left to help my child, and instead of defending me, you tell me to disappear." "It's temporary," Aurora said quickly, "just until this dies down." "I told them I'd make a statement, I'd explain." His laugh cut her off. It wasn't cruel, it wasn't loud, just tired. Explain what that a janitor dad had the nerve to matter for 5 minutes. Her shoulders tensed. "I'm trying to protect you, Evan." He met her eyes, and the quiet disappointment there made something in her chest shift painfully. "No," he said softly. "You're trying to protect yourself. And the company." Aurora didn't flinch, but she didn't deny it either. He stood slowly, as though his legs had to relearn the motion. The rain-stained window behind her cast muted gray light across the room, cutting sharp lines across his face. "You tested me to see who I was," he said. "And now I know who you are too, Miss Vale." That landed deeper than he intended, deeper than she expected. She inhaled, but words refused to come. He turned toward the door, pausing only to say, "Just don't tell my daughter anything. She's had enough nights of being afraid." When the door closed behind him, Aurora remained perfectly still. It wasn't her first crisis. It wasn't even her hardest. But it was the first time she felt like she'd failed at something more important than business. Outside, Evan walked through the polished halls with the hollow steps of a man carrying exhaustion like a second skin. Employees passed him, some curious, some sympathetic, some too afraid to meet his gaze at all. He stepped outside into the weak morning sunlight and let out a breath that shuddered through him. The wind carried a faint chill brushing against his face like a hand trying to wake him gently. He called an old friend to borrow a ride home. His own car still sat in Aurora's garage, but the thought of asking for it back made something in him twist. On the way home, he stared out the window watching the blurred world slide by. I should have known better than to believe last night meant anything to them. One act of decency doesn't erase the hierarchy they live by. Still, a part of him had wanted to believe her. When he reached the apartment, Lily pranced toward him in her socks. "Daddy, you're home early again." He froze for half a heartbeat, then forced a smile. "Yeah, baby. Today's a quiet day." She took his hand and pulled him toward the table. "Come draw with me. I made the lamp brighter this time." He glanced at her, drawing another yellow house, the glow now filling half the page. It hurt and healed him all at once. Later that night, after Lily fell asleep under the soft hum of the restored lamp, Evan sat beside her bed and whispered to himself, "Might have been stupid to trust her, even for a minute." His chest tightened. But at least Lily doesn't know. He brushed his thumb over her hand and felt her small fingers curl instinctively around his. "She's the only reason I keep standing." Back in her office, Aurora stared at her reflection in the window. She'd been standing there for nearly an hour, replaying Evan's voice in her mind. "You're trying to protect yourself. I know who you are now." Each sentence cut with surgical precision. Her phone rang. When she saw the caller ID, she almost didn't answer. Almost. She picked up. Her father's voice poured through like ice water. "I saw the news. This is what happens when you let sentiment compromise judgment." Aurora closed her eyes. "Remember what I taught you," he continued. "You don't apologize. You outlast." Something inside her finally cracked. She hung up mid-sentence. Her hands trembled not with fear, but with the sudden realization that she didn't know who she was outlasting anymore, or why. She sank into her chair, covered her face with her hands, and felt the first tear slip through her fingers. She had done exactly what her father would have done, and for the first time in her life, that felt like failure. As the tears dried on her palms, Aurora's eyes sharpened with a quiet, rising resolve. She didn't know yet what she would choose, but she finally understood this much. If she followed her father's path one step further, she would lose more than her title. She would lose herself. Aurora Vale didn't remember falling asleep. She only remembered waking up on the leather sofa in her office, her neck stiff, her thoughts scattered and her heart still beating with the same uneasy rhythm as the night before. The sun had risen, but only barely. Light struggled through the storm-streaked windows, thin, pale beams that felt more like hesitation than morning. She sat up slowly. Her head throbbed. Her chest felt hollow. Around her, the office was silent except for the soft hum of the air vents and the faint clicking of the thermostat adjusting to the new day. But even in that stillness, she sensed something shifting, something inside her moving toward a truth she'd spent years outrunning. She walked to her desk, opened the laptop, and clicked into the surveillance archive she'd left open. The first frame blinked alive. Evan stepping in front of a sparking outlet and pulling a young maintenance intern away before she could be hurt. The feed caught the faint crackle of electricity, the sharp pop of a near disaster. Then Evan kneeling beside the girl asking if she was okay. Aurora pressed play on the next clip. This time, Evan slipped a small wrapped box into the break room's donation pile. The tag read, "For Officer Ramirez's grandson." A Christmas gift he'd bought quietly without recognition. The cameras weren't meant to record sound at that angle, but Aurora could almost hear his soft laugh as he tucked the box behind the others so no one would know. She clicked on the next file. Evan leaving early one morning, no, not early. Right on time, right on the minute. Heading home to wake Lily for school because no one else could. Even across the grainy footage, Aurora could sense the urgency in his stride. A man fighting exhaustion but anchored by purpose. She watched clip after clip, each one stitching a portrait she'd been too blind or too trained to see. A man quietly holding up the corners of a world that rarely thanked him. A father pouring every remaining piece of himself into a little girl with frightened eyes and a lamp she trusted more than the dark. A human being she had reduced to a test. Her breath caught. What have I done? The question echoed in her ribs. She clicked open his HR file again, the one she'd skimmed before, but now every line felt heavier. Occupation before Vale Dominion electrician, reason for departure worksite injury during emergency repair, marital status widowed, dependents. One daughter, Lily Cole. Notes, always requests flexible hours for therapy appointments. Never complains. Takes difficult shifts. Staff often describe him as steady kind, always shows up, even when exhausted. Aurora pressed 2 fingers to her forehead, trying to quiet the ache building behind her eyes. She had turned a man like this into a pawn, no worse into collateral damage for a narrative she didn't even believe in anymore. Her father's lessons snaked through her thoughts, sharp and cold. Strength means endurance, not empathy. Tests reveal who deserves to stay. Never apologize. Apology is weakness. She clenched her jaw. Then something unexpected happened. Her lip trembled. It was small, barely noticeable even to herself, but it was the first crack in a shield she'd held up her entire life. Another knock came at the door. Her assistant stepped in nervous. "Ms. Vale, there's a document the communications team needs you to review. And also," she hesitated, "there's chatter in the building. People think Mr. Kane is lobbying the board." Aurora frowned. "Lobbying for what?" The assistant swallowed. "To replace you." The words didn't fall. They sank deep and slow like a stone into water. "I see," Aurora said softly. The door closed again, leaving her in a silence that felt sharper than before. She stood and moved toward the floor-to-ceiling windows. From here, the city was a maze of gray rooftops and misty streets full of people fighting their own battles, carrying burdens no one saw. Some people can't afford to be tested. Evan's voice returned like a bell tolling from a far-off tower. She whispered into the quiet, "I became the thing I hated." Her reflection stared back from the glass, polished, composed, expensive. A woman sculpted by a father who believed compassion was a flaw. A woman who'd spent decades proving she could be exactly as unbreakable as he demanded. But unbreakable wasn't the same as strong. It was just numb. Her throat tightened. If this is strength, then I don't want it. The confession slipped out before she could stop it, and once spoken, it refused to leave. Aurora turned away from the window and walked back to her desk with a kind of clarity she hadn't felt in years, raw, trembling, but real. She opened her laptop and pulled up the internal messaging system. For a moment, her fingers hovered over the keys. Then she typed a single line emergency board meeting. 1 hour. Attendance required. She hit send. The notification ping rippled across the building. She rose from her chair and walked toward the washroom attached to her office. She flipped on the light, staring at her reflection again, this time not with disdain, but with recognition. Her voice softened to a whisper, a promise to herself she'd never dared make. This time. I won't outlast. I'll stand up. The weight that lifted off her chest was almost dizzying. She stepped back into her office spine, straightening with resolve she thought she'd lost years ago. Not resolve to save her position. Not resolve to salvage her reputation. Resolve to be the person she wished she had growing up. The person Lily would deserve if she were her child. The person who could look Evan Cole in the eyes and say, "I'm sorry," and truly mean it. Her assistant peered through the crack in the door. "Ms. Vale. The board is assembling." Mr. Kane looks irritated. Aurora nodded once. Calm, steady, good. She adjusted her blazer, gathered her files, and walked toward the inevitable battle waiting down the hallway, each step sounding like a drumbeat. Not running, not hiding, not testing others to feel strong. Finally, she was moving toward strength itself. As Aurora stepped into the elevator, its doors sliding shut with a soft hiss, she inhaled deeply. For the first time in her life, the 60-story descent to the boardroom felt less like a fall, and more like a reckoning she was ready to face. The elevator descended with a soft, mechanical sigh, humming through each floor like a heartbeat too calm for the storm brewing inside Aurora Vale. She stood with her hands clasped in front of her fingers, interlaced tightly enough to reveal a tremor she kept hidden from the world. As the elevator neared the executive level, she felt the familiar shift in the building's energy, an almost imperceptible tightening the hush that came when people sensed something monumental approaching. The doors slid open. The corridor outside the boardroom was lined with framed photographs of every CEO since the company's founding. Her father's portrait hung largest, stern eyes, rigid posture, the embodiment of old-world dominance. His gaze followed her as she walked past her heels, landing on polished stone with crisp, unwavering taps. "Good morning, Ms. Vale," her assistant whispered, trying to hide worry. Aurora nodded once and pushed open the heavy boardroom doors. Inside, the oval table gleamed beneath recessed lighting. 12 board members sat in high-backed leather chairs, their expressions ranging from weary indignation to thinly masked impatience. Gerald Kane stood near the screen at the front, clicking through slides with the authority of someone already rehearsing a victory speech. The moment she entered, he straightened, giving a polite but celebratory smile. "Ah, Aurora." "We were about to begin." She walked past him silent while storms of assumptions swirled across the room. Gerald clicked to the next slide, the blurred photo of Aurora handing Evan her car keys. Enlarged, centered, surrounded by red-marked annotations, liability risk, reputational exposure, inappropriate association. "Let's be direct," Gerald said, pacing smoothly. "This is not the leadership image Vale Dominion can afford. Our stock dipped 3% overnight. Shareholders are panicked. Employees are murmuring. And all because our CEO exercised reckless judgment again." He paused beside Aurora as though inviting her to defend herself. She didn't. Not yet. Gerald continued. "I propose we remove the employee from our company permanently and issue a formal statement distancing this organization from him. If Aurora cannot enforce this corrective action, then we looked directly at the chairman must consider a leadership adjustment." A ripple passed through the room. Some flinched, others nodded. Aurora inhaled, steadying herself. "Are you finished?" she asked quietly. Gerald smirked. "Not at all, but perhaps you'd like to try explaining." "Yes," she interrupted. "I would." She stepped forward, placing a single folder on the table. Her voice, when she spoke again, carried a softness that didn't waver, an unexpected, grounded authority. "I watched the footage you used in this presentation," she said, "but I watched more than that. I reviewed 3 months of Evan Cole's work, his contributions, his acts of kindness, his sacrifices." She turned toward the board. "And I found something you didn't include." She clicked the remote. The screen changed. Now it showed a clip of Evan pulling a maintenance intern away from a sparking wire, likely saving her from a severe shock. Another clip followed Evan fixing a machine in the cafe to keep a line of frustrated customers from leaving. Then one more him slipping a small Christmas gift into a donation box with no name attached. Aurora faced them fully. This man is not a liability. This man is the reason this company works at all. Murmurs rose. Gerald's smile faltered. "And the worst part," she continued, "is not that we let the world turn him into a scandal. The worst part is that we were willing to sacrifice him to protect ourselves." The room went still. No leader with integrity should allow that, and no company worth preserving should demand it. Gerald stepped forward, voice tight. "Emotional rhetoric doesn't change." She raised her hand gently. "There's more you should know." Aurora tapped her tablet. A second file opened internal audit logs, time-stamped messages, metadata. Proof. Someone leaked the photo before sunrise. Someone who had access to internal surveillance. She looked straight at Gerald. "You." A shockwave rippled around the table. One board member leaned forward sharply. Another whispered, "My God." Gerald's face drained of color. "You can't prove I traced the metadata," she said simply. You sent it to 3 separate journalists. The chairman's jaw clenched. Gerald, is this true? Gerald sputtered. It was damage control. She was spiraling and someone needed to. This wasn't control, Aurora said. It was sabotage. A long, heavy silence followed. When the chairman finally spoke, his voice had turned colder than the air conditioning. Gerald Kane, until further investigation, you are suspended from all duties, effective immediately. Gerald's eyes widened, downright feral. You think you've won. Aurora exhaled, and her voice softened. I'm not here to win anything. I'm here to tell the truth. She turned back to the board. And the truth is this: I made a mistake. I hurt an employee who deserved compassion, not condemnation. I let fear and pressure guide me instead of integrity. Another breath. And because of that, because I refuse to be the kind of leader who breaks people just to protect a title, she placed a signed document on the table. I am stepping down as CEO. The room exploded into overlapping voices. Chairs scraped. Papers rustled. Someone muttered, "What is she doing?" Another whispered, "This will ruin us." But Aurora felt calm. For the first time in her life, she wasn't performing strength. She was choosing it. If leading this company means sacrificing men like Evan Cole, she said gently, then I'm not the leader I want to be. She closed her tablet, signaling the end. I'll remain as a major shareholder, but I will not sit in a chair that demands cruelty to function. The chairman stared at her, long, thoughtful, conflicted. Aurora, this decision is irreversible. I know, she replied, and she did. She walked out of the boardroom with the same steady steps she'd entered with, only this time they echoed with purpose instead of fear. The elevator doors slid open. She stepped inside, pressed the basement level, and whispered to herself as the doors closed. This time, I'll stand with someone, not above them. When the elevator reached the garage level and the doors parted, cold rain swept in, soaking Aurora's blazer instantly. She didn't care. She got into her car, hands trembling not from fear, but from clarity. She drove toward the one place she knew she needed to be, the modest neighborhood where a single dad and his little girl were weathering a storm she'd helped create. Rain fell in heavy, uneven sheets, drumming against Aurora Vale's windshield like 1,000 small fists begging to be let in. The wipers swiped furiously, but visibility remained a blur of street lamps, hazy halos, and shimmering puddles. She gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles blanched. The drive to Evan's neighborhood felt longer than any stretch of road she'd ever taken, longer than the miles she'd traveled building Vale Dominion, longer than the years she'd spent trying to prove herself to a father who never thought she was enough. Tonight wasn't about saving her reputation. Tonight was about making something right. She parked in front of the aging apartment building, the exterior worn from years of storms. The stairwell smelled faintly of damp carpet and old cooking oil, every step creaking as she climbed to the 3rd floor. The closer she got to apartment 3C, the more her heart hammered, not from fear, but from a rising truth she couldn't unlearn. She cared what Evan thought of her. She cared deeply. At the door, she paused, water dripping from her soaked blazer. Her hand trembled before she finally knocked. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the door opened. Evan stood there wearing a faded t-shirt and sweatpants, exhaustion etched in every line on his face. The hallway light cast a soft glow on him, the kind that accentuated how utterly human he was. His expression shifted the moment he saw her. "What are you doing here?" His voice wasn't angry, just tired, wary, guarded. Aurora swallowed. "I need to talk to you, not as your CEO." She hesitated. "As the person who failed you." Evan's jaw tightened, but after a moment he stepped aside. "Come in." She entered the small apartment, the warmth of it hitting her instantly. Not physical warmth. The heater rattled softly in the corner, but emotional warmth, lived-in warmth. Baskets of crayons. A pair of tiny shoes near the couch. A lamp glowing with muted yellow light on the table. The lamp. a symbol she now understood more profoundly than she wished. Evan crossed his arms. "Say what you need to say." Aurora took a breath. Her voice came still quiet but steady. "I resigned." He froze. The room seemed to go absolutely still. What I stepped down, as CEO, effective immediately." He blinked, not trusting his own hearing. "Why would you do that?" "Because I was wrong," she said, "about everything that mattered." He exhaled through his nose, disbelief flickering in his eyes. "That position was your entire life." "Exactly." She looked down, and that's what made it so easy to lose sight of everyone else's life. The truth spilled out ugly, honest, necessary. I let the board pressure me. I let my father's voice guide me. I let fear decide for me. And it cost you your dignity. It cost Lily her sense of safety. It cost both of us something that shouldn't have been touched. Evan stared at her, saying nothing. Aurora continued. "I watched the security footage you never knew I saw. I watched the kindness you show people, the sacrifices you make, the way you hold this building, the way you hold your daughter together." She swallowed as her voice softened. "You didn't deserve to be anyone's test." That struck something in him. A flicker of pain. A memory. A wound reopened. He sat down heavily at the table. "Do you have any idea what it felt like to hear you say, 'Your presence is a problem'? To watch the world twist what really happened?" Aurora lowered herself into the chair across from him. "I do now. And I'm sorry, Evan. Not the corporate version of sorry. Not the PR version. I am sorry as a person, someone who should have seen you before she judged you." He looked away, hands tightening into fists. "You made me tell Lily I was taking a break. I had to lie because I didn't want her to think her dad wasn't good enough." Aurora felt her throat constrict. "You were more than good enough. I'm the one who wasn't." The rain outside softened to a gentle patter. Somewhere in the building, a dog barked. A cupboard closed. Life continued, slow, weary, real. After a moment, Aurora reached into her bag and placed a slim folder on the table. "What's that?" Evan asked, wary again. "A proposal," she said. "Not charity, not pity, an opportunity." He didn't touch it. "Evan, you know the flaws in our safety systems. You understand the real lives behind our night staff. You've seen the places our policy fails, the people who hold this company together." She opened the folder, gently revealing documents and a job title printed at the top. Director of People and Safety. Vale Dominion Revised Role Proposal. Evan stared. She continued. "I want you to build the new policies. The emergency fund. The flexible scheduling system. The protections I failed to give you. You have authority, salary, benefits, everything the role deserves. You'll shape how this company treats its people." He slowly picked up the page. His voice was barely a whisper. "How do I know this isn't another test?" Aurora's answer came without hesitation. "Because some people can't afford to be tested, Evan." She held his gaze. "And I will never be the one to test you again." The words hung between them, soft, warm, trembling with sincerity. Just then, a quiet creak sounded from down the hall. The door to a small bedroom opened, and Lily stepped out, rubbing her eyes, clutching her stuffed bear. She blinked sleepily. "Daddy." "Is that Miss Aurora?" Aurora's breath hitched. Evan stood up instinctively. Before either of them could react, Lily crossed the room and wrapped her small arms around Aurora's leg. "Daddy smiles more when you're here," she said softly. Aurora broke. Tears slipped down her cheeks, unrestrained, honest cleansing. She crouched and hugged Lily gently as though holding something fragile and precious. Evan watched them, something shifting behind his eyes, something unspoken, something hopeful, but cautious. He looked at the folder again, then at Aurora kneeling beside his daughter, her tears falling freely into Lily's hair. He didn't know what his answer would be yet, but for the first time he realized it might not be no. As Aurora rose, Lily's small hand still wrapped around hers, Evan glanced at the job offer again, its weight settling differently now. Hope, fear, possibility. Would he sign it? Could he trust her? Or would this moment break under the fragility of everything they'd survived so far? No one, least of all Aurora, knew the answer yet. The night's storm had finally receded, leaving the morning washed clean and strangely gentle. Sunlight glimmered through the thin curtains of Evan's apartment, laying soft gold across the kitchen table, where the job offer still sat closed, but not ignored. Evan stood over it with a cup of coffee that had long gone cold, his eyes tracing the edges of the folder as if it contained both his salvation and his undoing. Lily hummed quietly beside him, drawing another version of her glowing yellow house. This time she added more figures, 2 tall ones, 1 small, all holding hands under the warm light. He swallowed hard. "You added someone new," he murmured. Lily looked up, her smile lopsided with morning sleep. "It's Miss Aurora," she said simply, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Because she came back." Those words settled into him deeper than he expected. She came back. For a man who'd spent years losing people to death, to circumstance, to life's harsh unpredictability that mattered. He sat down slowly. Daddy Lily tilted her head. "Are we okay now?" He brushed a thumb across her cheek. "I think we're getting there." His gaze drifted to the folder one more time. Responsibility, opportunity, purpose, fear, hope, all tangled together. He inhaled, opened the folder, and quietly reached for the pen. Later that morning, Vale Dominion's HR office buzzed with surprise when Evan walked in wearing clean jeans, a pressed shirt, and an expression that balanced resolve with uncertainty. "I'm here to sign the offer," he said. The director blinked twice before finding her voice. "Mr. Cole, congratulations. Truly." Evan nodded, feeling the weight of the decision settle into place. "Thank you. Let's get to work." What followed unfolded like a montage of transformation, not dramatic, not glamorous, but deeply human. Under Evan's leadership, the company began to change from the inside out. He met with single parents from the overnight shifts, listening to their stories like his. They spoke about juggling children and unpredictable schedules, about guilt, exhaustion, resilience. He wrote down every detail, every plea, every small truth. He worked with legal teams to establish emergency funds for staff facing crises, a safety net he wished he'd had when Lily's world fell apart. He met with engineers to redesign emergency protocols after discovering overlooked blind spots that put night staff at risk. He visited each department, custodial, maintenance, cafeteria, security, listening, asking, observing. The changes weren't just policies. They were shifts in dignity. And through it all, Aurora was there. Not as CEO, but as a steady presence walking beside him instead of above him. They shared coffee in employee break rooms, not conference suites. They asked questions together. They learned together. When employees approached with concerns, they didn't see a billionaire and a janitor, they saw a team. Their conversations deepened, too. One afternoon, after a long meeting with the facilities team, they sat on a bench outside the building, listening to the distant hum of traffic and laughter from a food truck nearby. Aurora said quietly, "I've spent most of my life believing leadership meant standing alone at the top." Evan looked at her, really seeing her. The exhaustion behind her eyes. The gentleness she fought to hide. "And what do you believe now?" he asked. She exhaled. That maybe the strongest place to stand is next to someone instead of above them. Evan didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The silence between them was no longer strained. It was warm, steady like a bridge forming plank by plank. Meanwhile, Gerald Kane's downfall unfolded without drama. The board initiated an investigation, and within 2 weeks leaked evidence surfaced confirming his manipulation and misconduct. He resigned quietly, leaving Aurora's name cleared and her reputation unexpectedly strengthened. But Aurora showed no interest in returning to the CEO throne. Something in her had shifted, her compass reoriented toward meaning rather than dominance. One afternoon, Aurora approached Evan with a small smile tugging the corner of her lips. "I want to show you something," she said. He followed her into the elevator, noticing how her fingers fidgeted with the hem of her coat, betraying a rare nervousness. When the doors opened, a breeze swept in, cool, gentle, carrying the faint scent of city air and distant blossoms. They stepped out onto the rooftop. The space had been transformed into a garden, still under construction, wooden planter boxes, fresh soil trellises ready for vines. But what stood out the most were the soft, yellow string lights hung around the railings, swaying lightly in the wind. A sanctuary in the sky. For employees, Aurora said softly. For their families. A place to breathe. Evan walked slowly, taking in the quiet beauty of it. The view, the air, the lights. "You built this?" he asked. Aurora glanced at him, eyes tender. "I built it because I needed to believe in something better. But I also built it for Lily." He stopped. For Lily, Aurora nodded. "I wanted her to have a place where the light never goes out." The meaning struck him deeply. He didn't hide it. Before he could speak, a small voice echoed from behind them. "Daddy. Look, it's like my drawing." Lily ran out of the elevator, her tiny shoes pattering across the rooftop. She darted between the planters, eyes wide with wonder, lifting her arms as though she could gather the lights themselves. Aurora turned to Evan, her expression gentle and uncertain. "I hope this is okay," she said quietly. He felt something shift in his chest, something loosening, something opening. "Yeah," he murmured. "It's more than okay." Lily ran back to them, her face glowing. "Daddy, we have a light in the sky now." Evan smiled, a real full smile he hadn't felt in years. Aurora saw it. And for a moment the world above the city felt steady in a way neither of them had known before. As the yellow light swayed gently overhead, Aurora's gaze drifted to Evan's hand, close enough to brush, close enough to reach, but not yet taken. And somewhere between the hum of the rooftop breeze and Lily's laughter, one unspoken question lingered in the warm air. What would it mean for all three of them if he reached back? The rooftop garden opened 3 weeks later on a crisp Saturday afternoon, the kind of day when sunlight felt gentle enough to trust again. A soft breeze carried the scent of new soil and blooming jasmine, rustling the ribbon strung across the entrance. Employees gathered with their families, their murmured conversations folding into the quiet hum of city life below. For the first time in the company's history, Vale Dominion felt less like a tower and more like a community. Aurora Vale stood near the edge of the garden, watching the families explore the winding paths between planter boxes. Children darted between benches, their laughter rising and falling like wind chimes. And above them, swaying in the breeze, a string of warm yellow lights cast their soft glow small suns against the sky. Evan arrived with Lily at his side. Lily gasped the moment she stepped onto the rooftop. "Daddy? It looks like my picture." Evan couldn't help but smile as she ran ahead, her shoes tapping lightly against the wooden planks. He noticed Aurora watching them, and when their eyes met, something warm flickered between them, steady, unspoken, unmistakable. As the employees gathered, Aurora stepped onto a small platform beneath an arch of lights. She waited for the gentle hush to fall, her hands clasped loosely in front of her. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the soft resonance of a woman who had learned to embrace her humanity rather than hide it. "Thank you all for being here," she began. "This rooftop garden was once just an idea, one I wasn't sure I had the right to create, but it became real because of the people in this company. People who show up every day, who keep our lights on, who keep one another going." She paused, the breeze brushing her hair aside. "I also need to say something I once believed leaders weren't allowed to say." Her voice softened. "I was wrong." Employees shifted in their seats. Aurora's gaze found Evan for a brief second before continuing. "I believed strength came from testing others, from proving myself unbreakable." She shook her head gently. "But strength Real strength comes from standing beside people when the world gets dark, not above them. A quiet murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Aurora exhaled her words steady. This garden is for your families, your children, your moments of rest. A place where the light is always on, because everyone deserves somewhere to come home to, somewhere they belong. Not once did she say Evan's name. She didn't need to. Every heart on that rooftop understood. The ribbon was cut, applause rose warmly into the sky, and music drifted through the open space as families explored. Soon, the rooftop filled with gentle clatter, children's footsteps, soft conversation, the scrape of chairs, the hum of life returning. As the crowd thinned, only 3 remained near the railing: Aurora, Evan, and Lily, each framed by the glow of the golden lights. Lily held a small paper lantern Aurora had given her earlier, lifting it proudly. "Look," she said, spinning lightly. "We have lights up here now. Even if we get lost, we can always find our way back." Aurora smiled the words, landing with a tenderness that nearly unsteadied her. "Yes, sweetheart, exactly that." Lily bounded off again, chasing a cluster of light across the wooden deck. Evan watched her for a moment before turning back to Aurora. "You did something good today," he said quietly. "More than good. People needed this, and they needed to hear you." Aurora's gaze softened. "I needed to hear myself," she admitted. "For the first time. I think I finally said something honest." Evan leaned against the railing, the city lights flickering below. "Honesty looks good on you." She let out a small laugh, soft, surprised, unguarded. The kind of laugh she hadn't allowed herself in years. They stood in silence for a moment, their shoulders nearly brushing but not quite touching. Finally, Aurora spoke again, voice low and sincere. "I've been thinking a lot about the lamp," she said. Evan raised a brow. "Lily's lamp." "Yes." Her eyes warmed. "About what it meant to her, what it meant to you, and what it meant for me to realize I never had one." Evan's voice gentled. "You have a light now." She looked up at the string of golden bulbs swaying overhead. "I built it for this rooftop. But maybe also for myself." He studied her for a long moment, seeing the woman behind the title, someone learning changing, breaking patterns she'd inherited without choosing them. "Maybe you don't have to stand alone anymore," he said softly. Her eyes flickered up to meet his, and in them he saw something he hadn't dared hope for: openness, vulnerability, a quiet invitation. Before either could speak again, Lily returned and slipped her hand into Evan's, then into Aurora's, joining them with innocent certainty. "Daddy," she said lightly, "can Miss Aurora stay with us while we look at the lights?" Aurora's breath caught. Evan's eyes shifted to hers, unsure, hopeful. She knelt to Lily's height. "I'd love to." They walked together toward the far edge of the rooftop where the view spilled out across the city lights, sparkling like 1,000 small promises. The golden bulbs overhead flickered on one by one, bathing the 3 of them in warm, steady glow. Aurora found herself standing closer to Evan, her shoulder brushing against his. He didn't step away. Their hands grazed once, twice, then finally settled into each other with quiet certainty. Evan let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "You know," he murmured, voice warm, "I used to think strength was getting through the night alone." Aurora leaned gently into him. "Turns out," she said, "strength looks a lot like a little girl who believes you'll always come back, and someone who stands beside you while you do." Lily lifted her lantern toward the sky, her small voice ringing gracefully. "Now we have our own house with the light on." Even in the sky, Aurora's eyes glistened. Evan squeezed her hand. Above them, the golden rooftop lights glowed softly as though blessing the moment, sealing it. A home made not of walls, but of people. A second chance built not from power, but from compassion. And a love born from the simple truth that some people don't need tests, they just need light to guide them home. And as our story closes beneath the gentle glow of that rooftop light, I hope you carry something with you, a reminder that strength isn't measured by how much we can endure alone, but by how much kindness we're willing to offer and how bravely we choose to stand beside one another when life grows dark. Because somewhere out there, someone is fighting a quiet battle you may never see. Someone is holding their world together for the sake of a child. Someone is waiting not for a test, but for a little compassion. If you have ever witnessed a moment like that, if you've lived through a chapter where someone's kindness changed everything, or if you've been that light for someone else, I'd love to hear your story. Tell us in the comments below. Where are you watching from, and what part of this story touched you the most? Your voice might be the encouragement someone else needs today. And if you'd like more stories filled with hope-healing second chances and the quiet courage of everyday people, make sure to subscribe to the channel, tap the notification bell, and join this growing community of listeners who believe in the power of compassion. Thank you truly for spending your time with this story. Your presence here means more than you know. Until the next tale, keep your light on.